It was a Sunday evening, August 15th, 1971. Most Americans were finishing dinner, watching television, enjoying the last weeks of summer. The economy had been unsettled, prices creeping upward, unemployment ticking higher, but nothing that felt like a crisis, not yet. Then the program you were watching was interrupted. Richard Nixon appeared on screen, calm, presidential. He spoke for 11 minutes. And in those 11 minutes, without a congressional vote, without a public debate, without warning, he did something that no American president had ever done before. He broke a promise. Not a campaign promise, not a political pledge. A promise written into the foundational architecture of the global economy. A promise made to every allied nation on Earth. A promise that had governed every dollar in every American wallet since 1944. He ended the convertibility of the US dollar to gold. And with 11 minutes of measured presidential language, your savings, your pension, your future purchasing power were changed forever. Most Americans watching that night did not understand what had just happened. That was not an accident. To understand the full weight of what Nixon did on that August evening, you have to understand the world that existed before it. In 1944, with World War II still raging, representatives of 44 Allied nations gathered at a resort hotel in Bretton, New Hampshire. Their mission was to design a new global financial system for the post-war world, a system that would prevent the kind of economic chaos that had fueled the rise of fascism in the 1930s. What they built was called the Bretton Woods system. Its foundation was simple and elegant. The US dollar would be fixed to gold at a rate of $35 per ounce. Every other major currency would then be fixed to the US dollar. This created a stable, predictable global exchange system. Countries could trust each other's currencies because every currency ultimately traced back to gold sitting in Fort Knox. For the American worker, for your parents, for your grandparents, this meant something profound. The dollar in your pocket was real. It represented something tangible, something finite, something that could not be created from nothing. A man who worked hard, saved carefully, and put money away for retirement could trust that those savings would hold their value. The system had a natural brake against inflation because you could not simply print more dollars than you had gold to back them. This was the promise. This was the foundation on which an entire generation built their lives. And by the summer of 1971, that foundation was quietly, deliberately being dismantled. Think about the year 1971 for a moment. If you were 30 years old that summer, you had spent your entire adult life inside the Bretton Woods system. You had saved in dollars that meant something real. You had planned a retirement in dollars anchored to gold. After August 15th of that year, every dollar you had ever saved began a slow, invisible journey, worth less each year than the year before. Not because of bad luck, not because of economic forces no one could control, because of a decision made by one man in a private meeting at Camp David over a single weekend with no public input whatsoever. Let's talk about that weekend. The official story Nixon told on that Sunday evening was simple. International speculators were attacking the dollar. Foreign governments were exchanging their dollar reserves for American gold at an unsustainable rate. The move was temporary, a defensive measure to protect the American economy. Normal service would resume shortly. Every word of that explanation was carefully constructed to obscure the reality. Here is what was actually happening. The United States had spent the 1960s dramatically overextending itself. The Vietnam War was costing billions of dollars that the country did not have. Lyndon Johnson's Great Society programs were expensive. And critically, the U.S. had been printing dollars far in excess of the gold it held in reserve. By 1971, foreign governments, France in particular, under Charles de Gaulle, had noticed the discrepancy. They had begun exercising their legal right under Bretton Woods to exchange their surplus dollars for gold. De Gaulle had sent a French naval vessel to New York City to physically collect French gold from American reserves. The run on Fort Knox was not a speculator attack. It was Allied nations legally reclaiming gold they were entitled to, because they no longer trusted that American dollars were backed by the gold the U.S. claimed to hold. Nixon faced a choice. He could cut spending, end the Vietnam War, reduce the deficit, restore the balance between dollars and gold, accept the political pain of fiscal discipline, or he could simply end the promise. The weekend of August 13th to 15th, 1971, Nixon gathered 15 advisors at Camp David. The meeting was held in complete secrecy. Congress was not informed. Allied nations, the very countries whose entire monetary systems were built around the dollar-gold promise, were not consulted. Treasury Secretary John Connally ran the meeting. His philosophy was blunt and was later reported by participants. The dollar is our currency, but it's your problem. By Sunday morning, the decision was made. The gold window would be closed. The dollar would no longer be convertible. Bretton Woods, the system that had governed global finance for 27 years, was over. Nixon went on television that evening and told America it was protecting them. What he did not say was this: a currency no longer backed by gold is a currency whose supply is now unlimited. A government that can print money without restraint will always, eventually, print too much. And the cost of that excess is paid not by governments, but by the people who save in that currency, by the people who trusted the promise. Here is the number that should make you stop. In 1971, the year Nixon closed the gold window, one U.S. dollar had the purchasing power of approximately $8.50 in today's money. Since 1971, the U.S. dollar has lost over 85% of its purchasing power. 85%. That is not inflation as an abstract economic concept. That is the retirement your parents planned, cut to a fraction of what they expected. That is the savings account your grandparents built, quietly hollowed out over decades. The gold standard was not a perfect system. Economists debate its merits legitimately. But here is what is not debatable. Before August 15, 1971, there was a natural limit on how much the government could spend beyond its means. After August 15, 1971, that limit was gone, and every dollar printed beyond the economy's real growth is a tax, invisible, unvoted, unchallenged, paid directly by anyone who holds savings in that currency. Nixon called it a defensive measure. History calls it the Nixon Shock. The immediate reaction to Nixon's announcement was not panic. Markets initially rallied. The Dow Jones rose. Commentators praised the boldness of the decision. Time magazine called it a daring move. The framing worked exactly as intended. What the media did not explain, could not explain, or would not explain was the long-term architecture of what had just been built. With gold convertibility gone, the dollar needed a new anchor, a new reason for the world to continue accepting American currency as the foundation of global trade. That anchor was found in oil. Within 3 years of the Nixon shock, Treasury Secretary William Simon and diplomat Henry Kissinger negotiated a secret agreement with Saudi Arabia. The terms were straightforward. Saudi Arabia would sell its oil exclusively in US dollars. In exchange, the United States would provide military protection and weapons to the Saudi regime. The petrodollar system was born. Every nation on Earth that needed oil, which meant every industrialized nation on Earth, now needed US dollars to buy it. Demand for the dollar was guaranteed not by gold in a vault, but by a military alliance with a Middle Eastern monarchy. The dollar's value was now underwritten by American military power rather than American gold reserves. It was a brilliant piece of architecture, if you were the architect. If you were a retired teacher in Ohio, or a factory worker in Michigan, or a farmer in Kansas, the system that had protected your savings since 1944 had been replaced, without your knowledge or consent, with something entirely different. Something designed to serve the needs of a government that had overspent, not the needs of the citizens who had saved.
Richard Nixon resigned from the presidency in 1974, 3 years after the shock that bore his name. He is remembered for Watergate, for the cover-up, for the helicopter lifting off the White House lawn. The economic decision he made on August 15, 1971, arguably the most consequential financial act of any American president in the 20th century, is discussed in economics textbooks and almost nowhere else. No congressional hearings, no national reckoning, no moment where America collectively decided whether this was acceptable. It simply happened. And then life continued, and prices rose a little each year, and savings bought a little less each decade, and the distance between what people were promised and what they actually received grew quietly wider with every passing year. This is how the most significant theft in American history was conducted. Not with violence, not with drama, with 11 minutes of calm presidential television. Jekyll Island designed the system. Operation Mockingbird ensured you never fully understood it. And on August 15, 1971, the last restraint holding that system in check was quietly removed. But here is the question that the next episode forces us to confront. Who truly benefits from a world where oil determines the value of money, where military power underwrites a currency, where the largest financial decisions affecting hundreds of millions of people are made in secret over a single weekend at a presidential retreat in the Maryland mountains? The answer involves a group that meets once a year in a different city each time. No press is permitted, no minutes are published, no votes are held. 130 people, heads of state, central bank governors, media executives, defense ministers, making decisions that shape the world you live in, while you were never invited, never informed, and never asked. That group has a name, and we go inside it next week.